Money Anxiety by Dan Geller. Dan is going to be joining us in just a moment, but I was reading the book, and in the introduction it said, I wanted to know why we experience the up and downs in the economy. How can we have greater insight into planning? And he then talked about having these new concepts in behavioral economics, which is studying the gaps between what consumers say and what they actually do. So in this behavioral orientation that he has talked about, he's going to be able to help us understand for retirees what it is that causes them to make the decisions that they do. So welcome, Dr. Geller. How are you today?
Very good, Russ. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, it's nice to have you here. Listen, part of my team is with me today. I have Pat Kelly here.
Hi, Dr. Geller. How you doing?
Very good, Pat.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Geller, tell us, what made you write the book?
The main reason and motivation to write the book was that I wanted to understand why we behave, financially speaking, the way we behave. We all know what we do, but the question is why. And after years of research and analysis, I figured out that the root cause is actually embedded in our biological makeup. Our financial decisions vary by the level of our financial anxiety because they originate in different parts of our brain.
All right, now you kind of got me there. So, based on I'm born and I have a brain and I have had something. What is in my brain that would make me risky? What is in my brain that would make me conservative?
Great, that's a great question. Okay, so here's the thing. In a most simplified way, we have three parts to our brain, or three functions. We have the reptilian part, which is in the back of our brain. This is the oldest part of the brain, that basically the sole purpose of this part of the brain is survival. This is where our instincts come from. This is where the instinct to run away when we see a tiger in the wood comes from.
Sure, we've all heard about that.
Exactly. And then we do have the cortex, the neocortex, which is the frontal part of the brain. That's the analytical part of the brain. That's where we calculate all the things that you do for your clients on financial planning and all that. Now, in the professional jargon, the reptilian part of the brain is called System 1, the instinctive. That's the fast and simple type of decisions, and the analytical part is System 2. The main difference between the two is that when we panic under fear, our biological default is to System 1 because that's the survival mood. And that's part of why we make the wrong financial decisions under high money anxiety and financial stress.
All right. Well, I guess the question then would be, how do we stop that?
How do we stop it? The first order of business is to understand why we behave the way we behave. So once, if we read the book and understand why, that's the first stage. The second stage is to make analytical decisions and use professionals such as yours and listen to programs such as yours and default to the analytical part of the brain when making financial decisions, not to make them under panic or instinctively, because in most cases they are wrong when done this way.
All right. So, if in fact we have a market which is falling dramatically over a period of time, I'm afraid my reptilian part of my brain, my survival, that instinctive part is going to tell me to make a decision. And what you're saying is, don't panic. Try to think this thing through. Get calm. Talk with somebody.
Yes.
Am I hearing you?
That's exactly it, Russ.
Okay.
That's exactly it.
Well,
exactly.
Money anxiety, is this something that's common, or is it experienced by most of us? What is this?
Yes. Money anxiety is basically part of our physiology and psychology. For example, the latest poll from Gallup poll, shows that retirement, for example, is the number one cause for money anxiety among people. 60% of the entire population that was surveyed indicated retirement as the highest level of money anxiety that they have among all the other categories of financial worry, such as college loans and standard of living. Retirement was number one. Now, even more interesting in the Gallup poll is that among the age group of 30 to 64, 70% of the respondents indicated retirement as the one category that gives them the highest level of money anxiety. So in other words, 7 out of 10 people in the age group of 30 to 64 have money anxiety.
All right, let me ask you, Doctor, by the way, we're speaking with Dan Geller, Dr. Dan Geller, who has written the fine book called Money Anxiety, and we're going to tell you how to find that in just a minute. But as we run out of time, I did want to ask you this question here. You state that our risk tolerance varies with our level of money anxiety. And how does that work?
Precisely, and this ties back to what we just discussed a minute ago, that the ratio between the emotional impact of loss to the emotional impact of winning is dynamic. So when in times of economic stress and high money anxiety, the fear of loss is much greater than the possibility of winning. So to put it in simple terms, in order for someone to risk a certain amount of money, the amount of winning needs to be 4 times at least the risk in order for them to consider it.
I see. Let me ask you this question. If in fact a retiree, and if in fact somebody, I've read this, that a retiree would be much more attracted to something that can guarantee a 4% return than have the possibility of making 8% but also losing money. Do you have any information on that type of a statistic?
Yes, that's exactly what we were discussing, that the especially in volatile times like now, the assurance of having a guaranteed, let's say, 4% return would be much more appealing than a risk with 8%. Absolutely.
Okay.
This goes back to the whole concept of that the fear of losing is much greater than the joy of winning.
Well, I found your book to be very interesting. It's called Money Anxiety by Dan Geller. And Dan, where can our listeners go to get your book?
Basically everywhere, but especially, of course, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, iTunes Store, Google Play, everywhere.
And we'll be right back.